What's up, y'all? You know what time it is. It's about to be that time.
Savage. That's what I imagine the Batman theme song would sound like if it was sung by Peter Griffin. I just got out of the Batman movie, and let me say, spoiler free, that this is objectively the best Batman movie. The best solo Batman film. Objectively. Because it's the closest to any comic iteration of Batman that we've ever gotten. The best Batman, in my opinion, is still Ben Affleck, because that is the only Batman to be as close to the comics as possible, in the vein that I could believe that this force of nature could be a member of the Justice League. Now that's a bit of a downfall with the Batman, whereas while still comic accurate, he's not that force of nature, but he's far more advanced than Christian Bale ever was in the role in terms of intelligence. And that is what Batman's superpower, his true superpower is. It is his mind. His mind is his superpower, because that's how he is able to lead members of the Justice League who are way stronger than him, because he's the coach. The rest of this video is going to be filled with spoilers and analysis, so you've been warned. Man, this movie was awesome. The biggest thing that I've always wanted out of a Batman movie to begin with is a movie that actually focused on Batman. A movie that actually, while called Batman, allowed Batman to be the main character. And this is not to say that the Batman wasn't the main character in some other films, but they were often overshadowed by the villains. The problem with all of the other Batman films is that they try to do this even screen time thing, or in some cases, they just let the villain take over, and then the movie is really the villain, and then Batman just happens to be there, all right? And sometimes Batman films are a sign of their era, right? The Dark Knight trilogy, great films. Not really the best Batman movies, though, all right? I'm very outspoken about that. They are films that really encapsulated what America was in a post-9/11 world. What if a billionaire went after terrorists? This particular film really felt like it was fixated on this particular era, and it was kind of a healing film, something that was trying to bring people together and hype up this idea of unity and rebuilding, renewal, you know, and this is kind of what we're all going through, and what we will continue to go through for the next, you know, however long it takes to get over this hump of the pandemic and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, I really liked that. I'm not sure if the third act was always that, or if it was a byproduct of everything we were going through, and then, you know, maybe there were reshoots. Several of the scenes in the film seem to have differentiated from my own memory of even the trailer, so I feel like there must have been a bunch of reshoots. Going off on a little tangent, but back to my main point, this film made Batman the main character. There is not a single villain in this movie that overshadows Batman in any sort of way. Penguin is supporting. Riddler, being the main villain, is supporting, is barely in the movie. Riddler being one of my favorite villains of all time, if not my favorite villain of all time. He probably is my favorite villain of all time. This film corrects a lot of mistakes that other Batman movies made, all right? They forgot that Batman is a detective. This movie did not. They forgot that Batman is smart. This movie did not. They forgot that Batman is the main character of the comics. This movie did not. In the Riddler, he's always looming. He's puppeteering everything that we're seeing, but we're not actually spending a lot of time with him. We're following Bruce on his journey to uncover all of this stuff. And a lot of the riddles were very smart. They were very well put together. And the mission of all of it, the going into the lore of the comics and like diving deep into the potentially seedy past of Thomas Wayne was a very smart thing to do. This is something that no other film really even attempted. Now, these are things that some of the games have dived into. These are things that some animated films have dived into. But none of the live-action films ever tried to besmirch the Wayne name. And there is always sort of this element to Batman where it's like he's fighting for this goal of saving the city, of living up to his parents' legacy, but not realizing that there's some other stuff going on. You know, you were a kid, man. You didn't really know what parents were up to. Were they good people? Yeah. But were they rubbing elbows with Falcone and all of them? Yeah, they were. So I really liked that. I loved Falcone in this. John Turturro was excellent. I had an opportunity to work with John earlier last year, and he's a great guy. And I mean, it's just funny seeing him play the most Italian character in just the superhero genre, because he is just one of the most Italian people in real life too. I mean, this guy brought his own olive oil to work. He stole like every scene that he was in, and I love that they went there with the Selina Kyle element. This is something that, you know, is pretty prevalent in the comics. You take a look at The Long Halloween, right, which is one of my absolute favorite Batman comic runs, and it's very clear that this film was partially, if not heavily, inspired by The Long Halloween. I mean, even we have a movie here that takes place on Halloween, right? Goes for about a week, you know, I mean, it could be considered a long Halloween. You have Selina Kyle, as prevalent as she is in that comic run. You have that connection between Falcone, which is also in that comic run, and others as well. Selina Kyle is the secret daughter of Carmine Falcone. Now, this is something that has never come up in any of the live-action films, and I'm glad it finally did here. I thought that Zoe Kravitz was surprisingly electric in this role. She did her thing. I really can't say a bad thing about any of the cast. Jeffrey Wright was another scene stealer. I mean, Jeffrey Wright's a scene stealer in just about everything, but this movie focused on Gordon more than any other movie ever did. You know, the Dark Knight trilogy focused on Gordon a little bit and, you know, built up that partnership between Batman and Gordon, but, like, this actually had, like, Gordon and Batman tag teaming. Like in the comics! Come on. I was just nerding out. I was just, like, fanboying in the theater, you know? And Jeffrey Wright's one of my favorite actors, so just seeing him, like, just chew dialogue with Batman was just so satisfying. So satisfying. Robert Pattinson surprised me. You know, I mean, everybody wants to hate on him for Twilight and all of that, but he brings in a solid performance. Did I like his voice all of the time? No. I mean, that was maybe a criticism. Sometimes I felt like I needed the subtitles on in order to understand what he was saying, but he does his thing. And any downsides that there could be and any complaints that anyone would have with his performance is carried by the script, the direction, and the cinematography. The fact that they just got Batman correct is enough to really just put this film into a whole other stratosphere. My favorite element of it, was the eyes. The eye contacts that Batman used. Now, I haven't been keeping up with Batman comics lately. I don't know if this is something that has been in the comics before, but this just seemed so intelligent. It was such a cool technology that Batman has these contacts in, and then when he comes back to the Batcave, he's able to replay the entire night. Oh, genius. Genius. He's able to pull images from it. That's how he's able to, you know, decipher Riddler's cipher, his riddles. Like, oh man, it's just all I've ever wanted, is to just see Batman be smart, you know? Alfred helping him out. They have a good arc there. They're not exactly on great terms at the beginning. By the end, they are. There's things to build to. There's elements of Frank Miller's Batman here with a lot of the dialogue, you know, the internal dialogue, the narration from Batman. That we have never seen in a Batman movie, but it is so prevalent in the comics. Batman's internal dialogue as he's walking around a crime scene or anything, and he's just thinking about everything. That was a really solid addition. Something interesting that I also liked was that Batman keeps a diary, a journal of his events each night. And it seems like, you know, while I was reading a little bit of it, it seemed like he's really going into his own psyche each night and trying to log that, which is also interesting when you consider the truth that comes out about his mother, that his mother was crazy and in and out of psych wards in Arkham. So, and I also liked that they made Martha and Arkham. I don't remember that from the comics. It's very possible that it is part of, some comic runs. I would imagine so. But brilliant. I wonder if those diaries are going to come out, right? I wonder if, along this trilogy, we, get a third movie where now Batman's been unmasked and they raid the Batcave and they find his diary and they go through it and the information that's inside goes public and, it really dives into his own psyche, right? It's going to be interesting to see where they go in sequels. Now, obviously, they've got Barry Keoghan as the Joker, which is obviously the big secret of the film. He was in The Eternals, which was a terrible movie. I didn't like it. If you liked it, hey, that's fine. I personally didn't. He was good in it. I'm interested to see where he goes with his Joker. I think that if he was chosen, and I mean, you look at the cast in this movie and how everybody killed it, he'll be fine. Colin Farrell. I've never been a fan of Colin Farrell. He was completely unrecognizable in this movie. The makeup deserves an Oscar nomination. The way they transformed him, jeez, unbelievable. There's just a lot of Joe Pesci energy here. Like my man sat in the makeup chair and said, "Let me get that full Joe Pesci," and then got on set and started doing a Joe Pesci accent. Savage. Finally made him an informant and a dealer. It's the best way to utilize the Penguin. The only weird scene in the movie is the in-between that leads us into the first Batmobile chase, because it's like Batman gets shot, we're following Selina on everything, we don't know what's going on, but it seems like Batman is like out for the count, and then suddenly he's just in the Batmobile, and now there's a car chase. But it really seemed like Penguin and his goons had the upper hand in that particular moment, and there was really no reason to flee. So, from a story element perspective, it was like they wanted to get that car chase in, which was fantastic. By the way, it's some great cinematography and choices were made in that. Just getting us to that was a little wonky. And that's probably one of the only complaints that I have. I think the best theme in this particular film is that the Riddler is trying to have all of this stuff come out into the light, right? And literally saying, like, he wanted Falcone to be brought into the light, and Falcone is literally brought out into the light, and that's, what ends up being his downfall. But what no other film has ever done is brought Batman into the light. There is a lot of daytime Batmaning going on. There's also just a lot of public appearances of Batman. Now, this is something that we see often in comics and even in the cartoons, that, Batman is no stranger to a crime scene. He's no stranger to hanging around Gordon and all of that. But none of the live-action films have ever really dived into that element. So seeing Batman walk past cops into a crime scene was very cool, very interesting to see. But even at the end, No other film has ever shown Batman be a hero to this particular extent, right? It's always he's the moody guy, he's in the shadows, he goes away. No. Batman earned an entire city's trust in this movie. He helped hundreds of people individually at the end. Like, it's so absurd, it's so insane to me, and so perfect. And it creates the stage for an entirely new franchise of Batman. The soundtrack is something that is also, worth mentioning. It's really great. And it's interesting how Nirvana really just blended, Kurt Cobain and Batman together. Who'd have thought? But it fits, bold choices that really worked. I think that there's going to be a barrier for entry to some people watching this film. Some people that have a preconceived notion of what Batman is or who Batman is based on the live action films, right? And while the Nolan films were a darker and grittier take, right? Those were dark and gritty for the sake of being dark and gritty, whereas this actually created a Gotham that made sense in this dark and gritty context and allowed everything to really just live in that grit. And that's such an interesting element to it. And it's you want Gotham City to be a character when you're watching these films, and it certainly was. And all of the sets in London really, really worked. This is not a happy Batman film, It's not a Joel Schumacher version. It's not a cartoon Batman. It's not a take the kids to go see Batman movie. This is what if David Fincher directed Batman. This is Seven meets Batman, with the Riddler literally following most of the beats of John Doe in Seven. All the way to the point of not being revealed until the very end, and then having, this twist gotcha moment, like Kevin Spacey did in that film. It's what we needed. And it's funny too, because I've literally said, if I was ever going to make a Batman movie, I would draw elements from Seven to put in there. They are setting up the Joker, but I do hope that they tackle some new villains as well. Ones that have not been in a live action film, or do ones that have been but correctly. Finally Riddler was done correct. It would be very interesting to see Hush. That's someone that, if I was going to write a Batman movie, I would focus on Hush, because it allows you to really dive into Bruce and the duality of just Bruce Wayne and Batman and all of that. Pair it with Man-Bat, and just... That's a conversation for a different video, what I would do for a Batman movie. I think I'm going to wrap this up here because this video feels like it's going to be very long. I had a lot to talk about, and there's plenty more to talk about. And I hope to have that conversation with you in the comments. All right? Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you later. Bye.
I've been swimming deep, deep. Savage.